Hello everyone and welcome to the Grumpy Surfer podcast. I am the Grumpy Surfer and your host Adz Lyson. Before we get into anything, as always, a little bit of housekeeping. So to get some Grumpy Surfer podcast t-shirts and hoodies, go to grumpysurfer.tmail.com to get yourself some cool merchandise. Also, to get 10% off your Umbi Surf 12-week program, go to umbi.co/ref/grumpy surfer, and there you can go and get yourself your 12-week program from the guys at Umbi. Still using the program. I'm on week 4 now and it has improved my surfing immensely. I cannot recommend this enough. It's brilliant, and I think they're just coming off some discounts at the moment as well, so go and have a look at that. It's brilliant stuff. And also 15% off your Northcore outdoor and surfing gear. Go to Northcore on the internet, and at the checkout use the code capital letters TGSPOD15. And finally, to get 20% off your Braw Surf merchandise, some guys up in Scotland, use the code capital letters Grumpy Surfer at the checkout. This fortnight's podcast is my first triple whammy podcast incorporating surfing, grappling and the military. My guest is a former sponsored surfer, a Royal Marines Commando veteran, which I've had the amazing fortune of taking through recruit training, and has now recently just opened his amazing Jiu-Jitsu gym in North Devon in the United Kingdom called Yama Jiujitsu. So please enjoy my conversation with a fantastic guy and my friend, Ben Rueth. Ben Rueth, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
Mate, 3 questions. I'll have to tie this into Jiu-Jitsu. So the first one's, how are you? The second one is, where are we? And the third one is, I'm going to use, have you trained today?
So, I'm good. Thank you. First question. And then we are in Yama Jiujitsu. So, in Chivna, near Braunton in North Devon. So we're sat inside the gym that I started probably around April time of this year. And have I trained? Yeah, I trained. One of our students came in this morning for a private session, so I have trained with him this morning. So
beautiful.
Good start to the day.
Well, you are my first niche podcast people, i.e. you've served in the military, you trained Jiu-Jitsu, and you're also a sponsored surfer before you were in the military. I think it's a pretty cool thing.
Yeah, it's weird when you say it like that, but no, yeah, I have done a few different things.
So you're one of those guys that you were in the military and you decided to leave, and you passionate about Jiu-Jitsu, probably more so about surfing at that time, and you set up your own business, your own academy, which is really cool. And what I love about this is, and we'll go on to our history in a little bit as well, is that you've decided that you're going to chase something that you were passionate about. So it could have been quite easy for you to leave the military and gone, do you know what, I'm going to go and be a labourer, or I'm going to be, I don't know, work on the circuit, the close protection circuit. But instead you've just chosen and followed what you wanted to do and open somewhere like this. I'll put a few pictures up on socials as well of Yammer. It's a really impressive place, and to open something like this is, from my point of view, knowing you, is really impressive, and I'm going to say I'm proud of you, man.
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. Right. So how do I unwind that? So first of all, I didn't choose to leave, just to make that clear. I got medically discharged for having basically not up to standard hearing. So as you would know, you have annual hearing tests, and mine got significantly worse throughout the time I served. So it got to the point where the hearing was so bad in one ear, in my left ear, that basically it was deemed kind of too dangerous to risk damaging my right ear. And I knew about that as it was getting significantly worse. The audiologists, the civilian audiologists, they were like, oh, you're probably not going to be on the trajectory it's on, you're probably not going to be able to serve necessarily a full career. So I kind of always had that in the back of my head, that whilst I was happy like serving and like having a career, it was almost like you sort of half knew like, oh well, what would I do if like each year I don't pass the hearing test, or it drops to that like next kind of level, and it did come to leaving, like what would I do? And it's interesting, like you're saying, not doing like close protection or not doing a trade, because I had like all of those dilemmas. So I had my medical board in November of 2020. So basically once they decide you're like going to be leaving, you've got like 3 months basically of like clocks ticking, do your retraining, and then that's it, like that's your last day. But because it was the middle of the pandemic, I was kind of like, oh, like what can I do? Like obviously there's certain courses available. I'll touch on that again, because I don't think the courses that are really available are particularly like good.
Well, tell me about it. I'm going through that now.
Yeah. So like literally, it's like I think it comes from like a lot of people, I think, join the Marines maybe because, and we'll touch on like why I did, but you're at that bit of a fork in the road, and you're like, oh right, what am I going to do with my life? I'm maybe not happy with what I'm doing right now. Like, I don't know, you want to challenge, you want to travel, you want to do something different. So you set your heart on joining the Marines, and then you pass and you have your career. But then when it comes to leaving, you're not necessarily any different, like in your mindset, than when you joined, in terms of like, oh, well, now I'm not going to do that. So what do I want to do? And it's like, well, I didn't know what I wanted to do 10 years ago. So now I'm leaving. I still don't know what I want to do. But the only constant, or the things that helped me decide, was basically like, Kathleen, like my wife, was always like, if I didn't get to jiu-jitsu like that evening, and because work had gone on and it wasn't like, I was like, oh, but we could have done that earlier, or we could have done it tomorrow. And I was always just like, oh my God, how am I going to get to jiu-jitsu? And then when I was looking at different careers, I was kind of like, oh, well, if I do a trade, like, whilst I'm an apprentice, if I'm doing that for like 3 years, it's going to be, pretty like labor intensive. And then like, will I be real knackered for training? Or like, if I do something else, like, basically, will I be able to finish that job in time to train? And then it kind of got to the point that every job I was looking at, whether it was like I looked at everything, like tree surgeons and different trades, it was always like, well, will the boss, and I was messaging people that did those jobs, it's like, oh mate, what time do you finish work? Like, does your boss like, will I like finish at 4 so I could train at 5 or something? And they were like, oh, well, kind of just finishes when it finishes. And I was like, oh, like, I shouldn't be basing my life around like the retraining being around like what time can I finish to do jiu-jitsu. And at that point in my life, like jiu-jitsu was my biggest passion. So I was kind of like, where Kathleen basically said, why don't you try, rather than like trying to finish work to do jiu-jitsu, like why don't you start jiu-jitsu and have that passion where I can literally, I'm happy to train 6-7 days a week. Like I love it, like doing it every day. So I was like, why don't you give that a go, and then do kind of whatever jobs kind of make ends meet in the meantime. And then obviously if it doesn't, as a business, if it doesn't succeed, then obviously like, then you can look at the retraining. But it was like, if I started retraining, like got 2 years into a carpentry apprenticeship or something, then it would be like, too hard to go back. So it was actually like, when I had kind of a sort of clean slate from leaving the Marines, it was like, now is the time to do it. But it is funny, like you're saying, like, oh, what are you going to do when you leave? Because like officers aren't necessarily having this conversation. Like, I've got a degree, but you go to the career centre and they're like, oh, so you're leaving the Marines? Well, you could be a labourer, you could be a plumber or a carpenter, an electrician. And when you join the Marines, you sit down and the first thing they tell you in like foundation is like, oh, lads, like, you're never gonna want for a job again. Like, everyone's gonna be so happy to employ an ex-Marine, someone that's like past the toughest like training in the world. And you're like, oh yeah, wow, I've really like set my life up here. And of course, I'm not saying like I regret it, but when it comes to leave, there's so much like negativity through like the higher ranks because they haven't left, or like they haven't got to that period in their life yet. They're like, oh, you don't want to leave, there's nothing out there now. I even had, when I was getting medically discharged, like the like the officer in charge that's doing interviews, like, oh, you know, if you decide to rejoin, because there's not much out there when you leave, like if you decide to rejoin, we'll be happy to have you. And I was like, oh, thanks sir, like I can't actually rejoin because I'm being medically discharged. And he's like, oh, okay, yeah, good luck. And it's like, it's kind of almost the polar opposite of what you're kind of like not led to believe, but like I think there are options out there, but it's just through like it's very similar to leaving school. I think like you just ask all your different mates like, what course are you doing, or what are you going to do? And then you ask like someone that you knew in the year above, and like, oh mate, what's your course like, or what are you doing now? And I think it's good to have that. I think like just I definitely reached out to a few friends that had left a year or two before and said like, oh, what are you doing and what do you think of that? And but yeah, basically it was all about like, will I finish in time to go to jiu-jitsu? And it turned out that most jobs I wouldn't be able to train 6 days a week. And then obviously throw in like I don't we've got a dog, Mabel, but I haven't got a family yet. So in terms of like throw in like parental commitments, if I was finishing a job at like 5 or 6 and then being like, oh, now I've got to go to jiu-jitsu, it's going to be like harder to find that time than actually like just doing jiu-jitsu kind of as a job.
You knew you were going to be leaving through being medically discharged. It was on the cards maybe for a couple of years, because I remember having numerous conversations with you prior to this. When you got to the point, and you must have been sort of like in the same situation where I am now. I mean, I'm coming to the end of my career, but you did what, 5, 6 years? 9 years.
Yeah.
That's really weird, because we'll come on to this, but I took you through training. Yeah. It's like, it's crazy. That time just like spins away from you. You must be, even in that time of 9 years, that those plays in your head are there. I mean, I've started my own business now a couple of months ago, which people that listen to this know that. But it must have been the same for you, knowing that you were going to start this, finding the money and the funding and your rent and decking the place out, and then that's just the start of it. And then on top of all that, you're like, oh, I need actual people to sign up to this. I need students to come and for me to coach, and for them to pay me to do this. That must have been quite a thing to play on in your mind, knowing full well that, you know, you had a wife and other commitments around that. It must have been quite difficult to play with.
Yeah, I think there's two sides to it. Like I kind of I don't like see it as a business. Like anyone tell you I'm probably the world's worst like businessman. I just based it around like, if I am going to do this, if I'm going to have a jiu-jitsu gym and we're going to do it, like how do I want it to be? Well, like what do I want to create? So it was kind of like, obviously like, yeah, where's the space? Like where's a good like location to have it? And then it just got to the point of like, well, if you're going to do it, like just do it properly. It was like, let's get like proper mats and like, let's make it look nice. And I think like making the effort to make the gym like look as nice as it does, just like sets the precedent for people to like, the way people would behave in the culture. You know, you people think, well, if they've made this effort in terms of like creating a nice, like welcoming, like friendly, like good kind of training and learning environment, then like hopefully they know you're thinking and like caring about other aspects. But yeah, it's hugely stressful, especially like my discharge date was March the 18th 2021, and obviously like gyms weren't legally allowed to be open. So obviously I didn't have at all that kind of like barrier of like still being paid while it was going to happen. And it was about the stupidest thing like you could really do, is be like, right, I literally, it's like illegal. Like when you think about leaving the range and joining a sport, opening a gym, you didn't think like, oh, the thing you want to do will literally be like illegal. So I was like, that obviously added a bit on. And I kind of kept thinking like, next month, like things will get back to normal and they'll open, and it kept getting postponed. And obviously we were paying rent at that point, because the unit came up and it felt like it was the right space, and we were like, oh, let's go for it, and be like, oh, there's no way that by the time I leave in March, like that you still won't be able to train even in small groups. And obviously, yeah, that overlap kind of happened. So we were paying rent and the gym like couldn't physically be open. And then like obviously as things started to progress and open up sort of through April, May, June, and then fully like by mid-July we were open. So like, yeah, it was definitely a stressful time. And then in terms of thinking like getting numbers in and stuff, but I never like thought like, oh, this many people equals like this much to pay the bills. It was almost like, right, if we create this environment that people want to come to, then eventually like it will succeed or fail, but it won't be kind of like about crunching the numbers. And that was a big thing with starting here. Like obviously I would get onto like where I started jiu-jitsu and why and stuff, but there wasn't in this area like a jiu-jitsu gym that I wanted to train at or in particular. So I was just like, right, let's create that space. And it's just kind of gone from strength to strength really each month as people come. But yeah, you definitely think like, oh, first month everyone will come through the door, and actually it's like it's such a slow trickle. Like each month, like a friend will recommend a friend, and like slowly build your members. But in the 6 months we've been properly open, it's like it's crazy how good everyone's got and how many like good members we got. So,
but I think that also pays dividends to the way that you are as well. You know, your commitment to just training people, and from my perspective, and don't take this the wrong way, from where you were at the very start as an instructor, bearing in mind I've been an instructor for this is going to sound really bad, it made me sound really big-headed, doesn't matter, I'm carrying on with it anyway. Where I've been an instructor for a long time, where you were when you started to where you are now is a massive difference, and you must have felt that a little bit as well, because the technical aspects now, I mean, I sit in some of these classes and in your classes, and I'm like, that detail's amazing. And and what I find, and I've talked about this before, is that I've been to jiu-jitsu gyms where they go, this is the technique and this is how you do it, go and practice it. Where you do something where my coach in Plymouth, Kenny, he does really well too. And he breaks everything down into really easy bite-sized bits, where even the most technical things, whether it's, I don't know, let's say I'm using the example of like a berimbolo roll or something like that, you break down really well. And from the very basic white belt level to the higher level, everyone understands what you're talking about. And whereas like you don't hear the whispers in the background, which sometimes you do, like, how did you do that again? Like, because you do hear that sometimes, right? You must have been training, like, how did you do that? There's no one does that. Everyone just kind of does it. And I think that speaks the level that you teach at. But what else is really cool is that you've built a really nice community here as well. I mean, I train here once a week if I can get in. Bear in mind, I'm only like 3 miles down the road where my gym is. And every single time I come in here, everyone's super friendly. No one's trying to smash or kill each other. And I think that just sets the precedent for something, what you've set up and the way that you are, which is really cool as well. And if that continues on, you're just going to, it's just going to grow extensively. And like you say, there isn't really anywhere in the North Devon area that has a facility like this, that is solely like your jiu-jitsu, but it's nice, it's clean, it's got white mats everywhere. It's just a really nice place to train.
Yeah, I think that was I think that's partly like because our goals were so clear. Like my favorite gym in the world is Unity Jiu-Jitsu in New York, and in the UK, we're affiliated. We're like really pleased to be affiliated with CF24 under Bryn Jenkins, who's my coach in Cardiff. And the massive things about those gyms are that in the same room, and that was the biggest thing I wanted to hear. I want to have someone that comes to me and says, I want to win Europeans or Worlds, and I want you to be able to come to the same session or train 6 days a week with me. And then also in the same room, someone that's like, I literally just want to build some confidence, or like, I just want to be part of a community, or I just want to just be involved in something, or I just want to like pass someone's guard, or like I just want to feel comfortable with when I'm out of breath or with someone lying on top of me. And the only way that can happen is by like really clearly talking about it, like saying like everyone's helping each other, working together to achieve their individual goals. And that was what was so important to me. So the way I can do it in a busy room is obviously if we are teaching like a guard pass or something, I try and be as conceptual as I can, because I'm a really like, whenever I've trained with people and we've started at a similar time or someone's been a similar level to me, I feel like they've always got better than me quicker. I'm not like by any means like have any or feel like I have any sort of natural ability or understanding, but I think what that does do is when I do get something, it helps me like really understand it, which obviously helps me explain it, and it helps me like never get frustrated. Like some of the people, I just don't get it, and they can tell me 3, 4, 5 times and they know that I'll never be like, come on now, like just listen, because I'm like, that's a failure in me. If they don't get it, I've still failed them in some way of not explaining clearly why we're doing something. And there is a lot in jiu-jitsu of like, you're expected to know that I don't know, we need to like pin their back to the mat to do this, or we need to like clear their legs to get our points or whatever, but you can't assume that people know that. So the way I think we do it when it's a busy class is I can stroll over to the more advanced guys and go, oh look, actually there's like, I don't know, a berimbolo entry from here, or like actually look, you can take this grip, or like if you pull this sleeve it'll stop them inverting or something. And then you can say to the others like, okay, so they're going to try and hold on to your foot, so you just want to like get their back to the mat and pin the hip this way and turn the head that way and create a twist in the spine or something for like a guard pass. So even if they forget like, oh, what hand do we put where, if they remember like, I'll create a twist in the spine or get their back to the mat, like I think they'll progress a bit quicker. But it was interesting. I just wanted to say, like, when you said about how my teaching's improved, like it is, it's a funny thing in terms of like, you get massive imposter syndrome. Like I wasn't ever like, oh, I am good at jiu-jitsu, or like, oh, I'm going to start a gym, or that's what I should do. Like you're constantly like, you're terrified, you know, you think no one's going to come, or people are going to be like, oh, what's he doing, or why is he teaching jiu-jitsu? But I just have to come back to the fact that like, I love doing jiu-jitsu. It gives me like so many endorphins. It's got me so many friends. It just like gives me so much that I'm like, okay, I'm going to just try and share that with people. But there is an element of like, I feel like, say I was just like, right, I'm going to quit everything and like move to like Brazil or something and just train every day until I get a black belt, and I'd be like, right, I'm a black belt now, I can come home like I'm legit or whatever, like I'm going to start a gym now, I'm a black belt. And I would absolutely make the same coaching mistakes that I would make today, or that I made 2 years ago when I started in like the village hall, because it's not just about like your ability to do something, it's like your ability to explain it. So I think actually like I'm pleased I'm coaching now, because I feel like my coaching experience is increasing with my jiu-jitsu like ability and performance, so that actually like as my performance increases, my coaching will be up there too. I definitely think it's a bit of a misconception that like, oh, you hit that level like competitively or performance wise where you can like smash everyone in the room every night, to think that could relate directly to like explaining something to someone new. I think
it's a good point to make, just because and this is from a jiu-jitsu perspective, I suppose it could be any martial art really, is the fact that just because you're a high level belt doesn't necessarily mean that you can teach well. But it's like anything, isn't it? It's like if you're like top of your game soldier, you've been away on numerous operations and you know you're really good at tactics, but just because you're good at that doesn't mean you can teach it. You have to have the right mentality, and you have to have the right conceptual ability to be able to see that everybody doesn't learn the same way. I'm a very physical learner. I have to do something to understand the concept or the skill to learn it. I'm not one of these people that can sit down and read a manual, for instance, and go, yeah, I know what I'm doing now, and then go away and do it. If I'm perfectly honest, and you know, I know we keep saying we'll go back and talk about this, but when I used to take recruits through training, there's this pamphlet called PAM 21. It's got all like the rifle lessons. It's got all the like basic military infantry tactics in it. I used to browse over it, when I did my lesson plans, never read it. I just did what was in my melon. So when I did a rifle lesson, for instance, I know there was a set way of doing something, but all I did was, in my head, I had a set sequence of the way that I was going to do it to build all the way up to like the weapons handling test at the end. And that's how I've always done things. I've never read something. It's really bad to say. I've never read something to be able to deliver it. I've had to do it to be able to deliver it. And yeah, going back to what kind of talking about with ability level and teaching, I think the only way that you're going to get better, not you, but as an instructor, the only way an instructor can get better is by instructing and learning from the mistakes that you're putting across. Now, if you've got this ego where you're like, I'm better than everybody else, and you come in there and you go, right, this is how we're doing this, and you don't explain it, it's going to take a really long time for any of those people that you're teaching to progress. Whereas if you've got a friendly and a approachable personality, where, like you say, you know, you've explained something 3 or 4 times to somebody and they still don't get it, well, then that's you as an instructor or a coach to be able to try and figure out a way to put that across to somebody else so that they do understand it. And I think that's quite an important thing to note, really.
Yeah, I think it's almost like the opposite to the Marines, where it's like, oh, I don't know if you're like in that situation. I don't know what I'm doing, but hopefully there's enough of us here that like no one will notice that I don't know this or something. And yeah, I think it's like if you have that environment where people are a bit like unsure to ask, even just a big thing that helped me when I was like a blue belt was my coach was like, just find someone with a similar-ish body shape to you, and just sort of imitate, you know, that's at a high level, and just imitate what they do and see what works for them. And I massively tell all my students that now, and like give them a hand. I'm like, you know, if they're, you know, like sort of depending on their body shape, and the same with the women, I'm like straight away like, oh, look how good this woman is, like she's a similar sort of size to you, like look what she's doing, and just find like a little kind of almost like little role model to watch. And I can show them, I can bridge the gap between what this high level athlete's doing and what they're doing. I can talk them through it and be that bridge. But I'm always just like, oh, find someone that's doing it well and kind of like emulate them. And it is like I was saying about that imposter syndrome, like you do have to have an element, especially in jiu-jitsu, where you're like can perform. Like I think people, you know, especially as they get better, aren't necessarily gonna like listen to everything you're saying if you can't deliver it and you can't perform on the mats or can't perform in competition. There's an element of that. But then like one saying that I always come back to that one of my friends said, he was like, Usain Bolt's coach can't run faster than him. And I tell myself that a lot. Like I'm not, I'm not 21. I'm not a super athlete. I'm definitely not a genetic freak. So like if in 5 or 10 years, I'm like wiping the floor with everyone, like I've failed everyone massively, like as a coach. Like, so I think as soon as you take that ego aside and you're like, of course I want to progress, of course I want to do well competitively, of course I want to get better, but like, you know, a rising tide lifts all boats. Like I want everyone to get better. Like, and as they get better, we're literally gonna bring each other with us. So I definitely think like, yeah, there's definitely just an element of like trying to train hard, trying to implement it, but it also makes me teach my weakness. If, you know, like I'd say I'm better at maybe playing guard than passing, so I try not to shy away from that and be like, you know, let's work our passing and let's break down like what works, or and like kind of go like that. But yeah,
let's go back and talk about Ben Rueth origins. So where were you born? Where did you grow up? How did you get into surfing, and how did you get into jiu-jitsu?
So yeah, I think I've got quite a unique sort of entry to jiu-jitsu and to the Marines actually. But so I was born in London, and then we moved to Devon when I was about 15. So I was a bit older, but we'd already had friends that had lived in North Devon in Braunton for like my whole childhood. So every summer I'd come down and surf, and I like kept a little old surfboard in their shed. So I was already like very much just, I was like, oh, as soon as I'm old enough to move down on my own, I want to move to North Devon and surf. And but in the end, like my whole family moved down anyway. So my parents moved to Braunton, and then it was just like from then it was just like I had that like pent up like surf froth. So every day I just went surfing, which was a dangerous time because it was like the sort of age I was given the freedom of going to college as well. So like there was a lot of college missed and a lot of like surfing at Lynmouth and stuff done through the winter. And then through the summers I lifeguarded. So that was I think like lifeguarding had like a big influence in my life at that stage. So every summer I'd lifeguard. Like before it was the RNLI. It was a different company, and then the RNLI took over. But that was always like every summer I'd lifeguard, and then when I finished college I went away for like 2 winters in a row and lifeguarded in Sydney, and then came back, lifeguarded again, and then went to uni for 3 years, and then came back and lifeguarded. So it was always like the lifeguarding was always the constant. Like every summer I would kind of do that and then just sort of do something different throughout the winter.
Was that just to pay the bills so you could like live a little bit, travel a little bit,
basically,
and
yes,
surf?
I was at Hotel Mum, so it was just like RNLI money was just, or like lifeguarding money was just, just basically saving to try and go travelling or save up for.
How did you end up out in Hawaii? Because I'm quite interested in the story, if I'm perfectly honest.
Yeah. So, and that leads to like jiu-jitsu. So, I'd always done a little bit better in like bigger surf. Or like just being confident in it. I didn't like feel as sort of fearful as like some people. I just felt comfortable. So I always wanted to go to Hawaii to like experience like what that was like. And actually the girl I was with at the time that I met at uni, she was from Hawaii. Her family were from the North Shore. So when I finished uni, I went to Hawaii with her. And that's where like jiu-jitsu actually came in, because obviously Hawaii is like heavily localized, and it's like you can't just go up to someone like, oh, I like surfing, mate, do you want to like take me out of a pipe and we'll go surfing? And I saw that all the local surfers, or a lot of them, did jiu-jitsu. So I thought, oh, that would be like a really cool way to kind of be part of the community, especially as at that stage we were thinking about living there. So basically I just started going to, they had it in just outside of Haleiwa. Kai Garcia, who's like one of he used to run the Volcom house, he was teaching classes there, so I just went and started training there. And then we moved to Australia, because obviously with America, like you can't work and you can only get a short visa. So I still had like one Australia visa to use, so I went and lived in Australia for a year. But from then I just had the jiu-jitsu bug. So as soon as I got to Australia, I was like, oh, where's their jiu-jitsu? Probably would have just Googled it and then rode my bike, and then just, that was it then. So I was lifeguarding in Australia on the Gold Coast, and then just training. Like you probably noticed I've got like quite an obsessive personality. So I wasn't like, oh, I'll train once or twice a week. I was just like on this little bike that I bought, and I was just training like probably 5 or 6 days a week, like straight away, just like, and I think that's sometimes why I not struggle, but like having the gym, some people are like, oh, I'll train once this week, I'm a bit tired. And I'm like, Kathleen has to calm me down, because I'm like, oh, but when I did it, I trained 6 days a week, because I was like, I love this, how do I get good? But obviously that's not like the healthiest approach. But that was it then, basically. Trained in Australia until the visa ran out. Went back to Hawaii with the girl I was seeing, and then we broke up pretty out the blue, but we broke up. And that was when I was like, I remember like being sat in the room, and I was like, oh, okay, like what am I going to do now? Because like the trajectory you thought your life was on has changed. And I remember sitting there literally like as we broke up, being like, I'm going to join the Marines. And I literally like changed my flights like 2 days later. And I remember like I had to go back to Australia to get some of my boards and stuff that I'd left there. And I remember like going for like a little run at Manly, like just along the beachfront, and being like, oh, like, yeah, I've always thought about this, like let's do it. And it was quite funny actually. I thought of this story this morning, where actually like when we were flying to Hawaii, do you remember Commando on the Front Line, like that? Yep. That program? We're flying to Hawaii, and I was like, when you're flicking through the films, and before like the plane had even taken off, like I was just like flicked through, and I was like, oh, Commando on the Front Line, like this looks cool. And they only had 2 episodes, and they didn't have the whole series. And I watched 2 episodes, and I was like, oh wow, like I finished uni, like, what am I going to do with my life? Like, and we were going to Hawaii, but in the back of my head, I was thinking like, oh, like, I'd always been intrigued by the challenge of joining the Marines. And when I was lifeguarding, like, two of my good friends that had lifeguarded had both, one was an officer and one had just like gone through training, and they'd both like passed, and I'd always just remember just like asking them everything about it and being like, could I pass? Like, it was just like, you know, like 32 weeks training, and there's always that like thing in the back of your head. And I think for me, that was why I joined. I was like, could I actually pass training? So as soon as like I wasn't in that relationship anymore, I was like, yeah, join the Marines. So I literally like flew home, and then the process took a little while just because it was, I think they just slowed down recruitment a little bit. It was like 2011.
It was during the Afghan period, wasn't it?
Yeah,
so there was an influx of people that wanted to join the Marines just purely for the fact that people had been playing Call of Duty, and they thought, oh, Afghanistan's on Call of Duty, let's try and go there. And then, but there was an influx of joining, but there was also an influx of leaving as well straight after that.
Yeah, so that was like, just literally came back from Hawaii, got back here, and then like, kind of went to the careers office. And then it was funny because I've got a degree in art, which like was pretty useless. So it was kind of like, I either have a degree in art, there's this massive fork in the road, and maybe do like a PGC and be an art teacher, or join the Marines. And it was like two complete polar opposites. And I did some volunteering in Ilfracombe School, and I thought like in the art department, and I was like, this is like enjoyable, but I don't want to be like 35 and have been an art teacher sort of for 10 years and then be like, oh, like not scratch the itch for joining the Marines. I was like, I need that isn't going anywhere. That doesn't have an age limit on it. Whereas obviously the Marines like massively does. So I was like, oh, let's just go for it basically.
How was your whole experience going through training?
Well, yeah, you said
this is where we met.
Yeah, saying that with a smirk on your face. It was not like people laughed, like anyone that knew me really, like, kind of like laughed when I said I was going to join the Marines. I don't know if it's just my like personality, or like I'm probably like pretty unlike stereotypically Marine-y. But I just sort of knew that I wouldn't quit. So I was like, I wouldn't say I wasn't phased, because I was just like, you know, each week's hard and it's, you know, it sucks. But I was just like, with the challenge, I was like, well, I know I'm not going to quit. So like, let's just try to stick with it and see how it goes. And scraped through as an original by like the skin of my teeth. But I think like I look back, it's like obviously every day during training you're like hating life, but I look back on it like quite fondly. And I think like the friends that you make in training, you're still like really, really close to. I think actually like it was harder when you pass training, because I think in training it's designed to like not be enjoyable and be tough. And I think you think, oh well, once this is finished, the Marines is gonna be so good and everyone's gonna be so friendly. Like I'm only being treated badly. I messed around because I'm a recruit, and once I'm a Marine, it's gonna be great and everyone's gonna get on. And then when you pass out, you're like, go to a unit and you're like, oh, this isn't what I had imagined. I think, you know, and I think that's when like, maybe perspective changed a little bit. But
I just done my PTI's course. You passed out 2011? 10, 11?
Yeah.
Because I think
12, it might have been 12 then.
Yeah, so I just done my PTI's course on the back end of Herrick 12, and I remember getting given this truth, and it was was it Birdie was your PTI?
We had a feel like it was Birdie, and then he was away, and then Ben Wadham, and then he was away. They kept getting basically like drafted, so we never had like a...
Yeah, I remember given your troop, and we got to it was sort of the tail end of the bottom field assault course stage. And I remember someone telling me, there's this recruit, and he's a bit of a surfer and stuff. And I remember having a little chat with you. I get very suckered in to individuals and people in the present. If I'm with somebody, I'm invested in those people that I'm around, almost to the point like if I'm around them enough, like in any relationship, you care about them. So with recruits, I always wanted people to do well, And I think because we had this subversive relationship where I was passionate about it. I've been doing it since I was like 14 years old. And I knew that, you were, and you were from the area that I surfed in anyway. I'd never really heard of you before, but, it's probably because I never met you. So I had sort of like this underlying relationship. And then I remember, because you used to struggle with the ropes, didn't you? I probably never told you this, but I used to absolutely hate it. And I was like, there was you and another lad. What was the tall lad called with blonde hair?
Gurney,
I actually liked him. He was it was a bit of a biff, but I actually quite liked him too. And I think I like underdogs. So when you come to doing like your bottom field pass out to go on to the commando tests, I was always at the bottom going, get up there. And both of you used to get within a hand's grasp of the top, and it used to drive me nuts. It was such a funny, I guess, for people that don't know, it's obviously like criteria tests, aren't there? And if you don't, as a recruit, you're just terrified of getting back treated and having to do it all again. And it was just those getting to the top of the ropes. I don't know why, it was just this massive it was a definite mental block. Where you just I can't get up there, and that was funny because I did my obviously the last thing you do in training is the 30 miler, but I'd failed the Tarzan assault course, so I had another go, but I had to do the 30 miler first. So I was doing the 30 miler, and everyone's running, all the training team are like, oh, come on, mate, this is hard, but there's a green beret at the end of it. And I was like, oh yeah, they're like, isn't actually for me. I've got to finish this and then do my Tarzan tomorrow. So in the back of the head, you're thinking right, I've got to finish this, but I could actually have to run this again. If I don't pass my Tarzan, I'll have to do everything again, which is you don't want to think about as you're running 30 miles across Dartmoor. But it was funny because I saw quite a few people in my section went down and didn't finish and couldn't carry on quite early on. And I was there was an element of, they were some of the fittest ones, and it was almost like they'd not found anything hard yet, that hard. They'd got through the other tests, and not to say they're not really hard, but they were just I don't know, athletic enough to have got through them and pushed themselves, but not felt that challenge. And then the 30 miler, loads of them were just dropping off. And I was literally everything's been hard for me since the PRMC, every day's sucked, so this is just another day that sucks. So I did the 30 miler, and then everyone got their green berets, and they were calling me over. I was like, no, I've got to do my Tarzan. They were like, oh shit, sorry. So I stood off to the side, and then obviously doing the Tarzan, you're thinking obviously I want to finish this, get my green beret and pass out with my troop. And then you were also thinking, I don't want to have to do the 30 miler and all the other tests again. So luckily I guess I needed that pressure and then passed that. But it was funny. I feel I added a lot of stress to the test that I probably didn't need to be there. But stressful as an instructor as well, because you never want to see people fail. I was like, oh man, come on. What did how did you find passing out of training? You said that it was kind of a bit of an anticlimax, really. So how did you find the transition from that, and then the 9 years that preceded that?
I think this, it definitely really had some really good times. I made some amazing friends. I think it's now it takes a little while to appreciate how good a friendships you've got. You just massively take them for granted, how everyone in the Marines is just such a good community. And I think I have really struggled at some points recently with trying to find that again. Although obviously you're surrounded by people a lot of time at the gym instructing, is less just kind of friends sort of messing about and stuff. So I definitely miss the boys and the friendships I made. There was one draft that I was in for 4 years, so it was longer than obviously the normal 2 years that you rotate through. So that period is probably my fondest period, where I was with basically the same group for 4 years. So we got doing different trips and stuff, got tight. And we're still in a WhatsApp group now. We just talk probably every day in some capacity. So I think that was my highlights, aside with travel and stuff. But
how did your jiu-jitsu journey continue? Because I know it kind of tethered off a little bit. I started training jiu-jitsu in 2000 and I want to say 14, maybe. And I'd only been training a little bit. probably about 6 months, and I entered into the Nuki Open, and we were both the same.
Same division.
It's we were the same division, and I think there was only 3 or 4 of us in the division. This is not a story to make you feel awkward, by the way. And I remember I thought, do you know what? Fuck it, I'll just enter it. So I went into it. So my wife and my daughter at the time came down to Nuki, and we were against each other in the first thing, and we trained with each other. Probably, I don't know how, a little bit before.
Yeah, I trained previously. Yeah.
For anyone who doesn't know, Ben's got really long limbs, so he's like, I'm not going to say gangly.
Long skinny legs. I don't even have long limbs. I just got long skinny legs.
Yeah, and he's really good at catching triangles, and that was his thing at the time. Was triangles, and I remember just saying to myself, just don't get caught in a triangle. And I think it was the time limit was 4 minutes. And in the first minute and a half, I got caught in a triangle, submitted by him, and then that was me for the competition. But I think did you go through to win that one?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, so we went through to win it. So my saving grace was I lost to the bloke that won it. But
triangles are still my thing. I think it's a funny story about my triangles actually. Like when I was saying I was training in Australia, I was training, so they had an affiliate gym that was in Burleigh, and the gym I was training at was in like Tweed Heads. So because I was like, I've got to train 6 days a week, I used to bounce between the 2 gyms to like fit in with the classes. And they had a Saturday morning class in Burleigh, and there's a guy, he's a black belt now, he's a Jiu-Jitsu black belt called Jugs, and I think it was a brown belt at the time, and I went to the Saturday morning class, and the main instructors were away and Jugs was taking the class, and he was like, he just taught a triangle choke basically. He was like, taught basic kind of like, this is how you do a triangle. So I like went to the class, saw this triangle, and I remember like rolling a little bit that day and hitting a couple triangles. And then like I went back to the Tweed gym, so on like the Monday, and I just remember like going around the room, like just triangling everyone. And it was like the first like kind of like eureka moment where I'd like had success with like submitting people as opposed to just like getting smashed. And I remember the coach being like, hey, like who's been showing you that? I went trying to do Aussie accent. He's like, who has been showing that? And I was like, I went to the Saturday class, and like Jug showed me a triangle, and he's like, oh god. And like that was kind of like it was like a self-fulfilling prophecy where I was like, because I'd had this first success of like submitting people with a move, I was like, oh, let's just get really good at triangles. And then as my like jiu-jitsu's developed and progressed, I've like just tried to get like more advanced like guards and entries, but always looking for like basic triangles from everywhere, because I had that early success. But yeah, it's just funny that like that was my thing, and it sort of still is, although I've tried to like massively develop other aspects of my game. It was like triangles are my thing, but I realise I've got to have some sort of benefits to having long skinny legs that everyone laughs at, so you may as well be able to triangle people if you can't wear shorts.
I think we should have just renamed you T-City instead of Brian Ortega. I think what we've not covered really is your surfing career, because you were a sponsored surfer, earlier on when you were younger and while you were lifeguarding. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
The surfing thing is funny. Like I definitely wouldn't say I was like a sponsored surfer or professional. Like I was in the era just before like the global economy collapsed. So surfers were getting paid loads of money and brands were like desperate to get in on the action. So like if you could stand up on a surfboard and go along, people were like, oh, have a t-shirt, or like have some t-shirts and have some wetsuits. So because I was lifeguarding and I was at the beach and I was surfing and like doing a few competitions, I was like lucky enough to like get some wetsuits and some clothing and some support from brands. But it was very much like just kind of like right place, right time of that era. I wouldn't consider myself like, I wouldn't fit into the character. Yeah, I wouldn't fit into like, Ben's a good surfer or anything. I was just like at the right time, right place, got some stuff. And because I was like, so again, obsessed with surfing and surfing all the time, like sponsorship, if that helped in the sense of like having wetsuits or clothes or connections or like going on possible trips or getting photos, it all just kind of like fed off each other. But yeah, surfing's something I absolutely like love, and definitely feel a lot more confident like when the waves are a bit bigger. But but those legs that are good for triangles aren't so good for getting under your feet and doing turns with. So
we did a Morocco trip together a few years back, and we surfed a spot called Boilers, and we were all catching this peak and going down. And then I remember I got out, and you caught this one wave, and it went on, and I probably over-elaborated it, over-egged it in my head a little bit, but it looked like you were about a mile, and you just like went all the way down the line and like round the corner from where we were. And I was like, "That, how's he getting back?" And then you come like walking.
So funny, yeah. The guide was just like, "Where's he gone?" But that was such a funny trip actually, because, like I said, I was at that big fork in the road when I joined the Marines, and I was kind of like, right, surfing's like, I think because I'd always thought about joining the Marines, like, you know, age like 18, and I think the big thing that stopped me really was like, you know, 30 weeks of training, you're probably going to get about 3 days to surf or like summer leave or whatever. And I was always like, oh, I don't want to go that long without surfing, whereas any other job I did would allow me to surf. And I think that's the main reason I didn't join when I was younger. So obviously when I got to the period when I was like a bit older, and I was like, right, I'm going to do this, I'm going to join the Marines. I think sort of subconsciously did put surfing on like the shelf a little bit. So it was funny when I passed training, you were like, oh, there's a trip to Morocco. Like, do you want to come? And I was like, oh yeah, I will. And I was literally like, oh, I haven't actually got a surfboard or a wetsuit. Like, I went to my mum's house and I was like, oh, where is everything? And so I like phoned Cotty, obviously he's like one of my really good friends, and he's got like no shortage of boards and wetsuits. I was like, mate, I'm going to Morocco like tomorrow. Can I borrow some boards? And he's like, oh yeah, just like go to my mum's and just take what you want. And like, she's like so used to just having me rock up at the house and just be like, oh yeah, Andrew said I can go in the garage. She's like, oh, come on Ben, do you want any Red Bulls? And like, I'm literally just like raiding stuff. Like, if the surf gets big here, I'm like, oh, can I have a board? And like, yeah, he must get pretty fed up with it. But so I was just like, oh yeah, this board, and this board. Just like putting boards in the board bag, like living like I was a pro surfer. And then like literally went to Morocco, and like all the boards were too small for me. I was obviously like heavier than Cotty, and I was just like struggling. And then I was like, oh no, actually I do really enjoy surfing. I think that reignited my passion. That I was like, so when I came home, I bought a board that was like more suitable for me, and I've always had like wetsuits and stuff good to go. But I think I needed that, like, oh no, you've passed training now, like you can actually surf a lot, and surfing can be a good part of your life. And I think I enjoy it more now that jiu-jitsu is my main passion and my main focus, because then surfing, I think for me, is like what it should be. It's just this amazing release of like, you're in the ocean, you know, you just literally, I don't look for a surf now and be like, oh, I've got to have done 3 turns on a wave, otherwise like life's not worth living. I'm like, oh, it's so nice to be in the ocean, it's so nice to chat and see people, it's so nice to like just get a few waves. So I love surfing probably more now, because jiu-jitsu is like, has its stresses, obviously has its like linked into the business and stuff. So surfing now is just like this amazing like just release, no pressure. And I think I surf better because of that. Like subconsciously, you're like, oh, there isn't any pressure. If you're having a bad surf, like it doesn't matter because you're in the water. So I'm literally now just like, yeah, normally have a lot more fun than I would have had. So yeah, getting that balance back with surfing really. And I think that's the big thing for here, that I think with surfing and jiu-jitsu, that I would like more people to kind of know about and make the connections. Like Joel Tudor's just won the world longboard title, and he's a good black belt. A lot of the guys on the pro tour train, like Jack Freestone's a good purple belt. So it's like just building that connection really between how good surfing is with jiu-jitsu. You know, it requires similar kind of like mobility and like physical attributes. And obviously when there's waves, like you surf all day, but especially in England, there's long periods where the waves aren't great, and especially through winter, to feel like you're progressing at another sport is really good. And like I said, the community, like the reason I started in Hawaii, has just served me so well. Like I go to France every year, go to Hosaga, and just as soon as I get off the plane, I go and train at Hosaga Jiu-Jitsu, and I'm like, oh, where are the banks? And they're like, oh yeah, up at like Le Penon, and then there's one at like just north of Estan Yachts or something. And just straight away, I don't even have to spend a week trying to find where the banks are. Like I just go and surf. And like Ericira, the same. Like there's normally a jiu-jitsu gym somewhere, and you just go and train there instantly. You're like straight in, like straight through the back door. Like when we go back to Hawaii eventually, like Ezra's gym is at Sunset Beach. Like it's just this huge like way of being welcomed into a community without trying to like be like, oh look, I surf too, because like surfing's the most selfish thing in the world. You don't want more surfers there, whereas jiu-jitsu, you literally want, as long as there people are friendly, you want more people. It's like another person to train with, it's another person in the community. So I think they go so well together. That's like definitely kind of been one of the big pushes for here, where I've been like hassling surfers to come and train.
So Yammer is outside Braunton in North Devon. It's growing. You've got a good growing community here, but you're also competing as well. You're in the British on Sunday, is that right?
English, yeah.
English, yeah. So a couple of questions. Where do you see Yammer going, and where do you want to go with your competitive career as well?
Yeah, they're definitely two different things. In terms of Yammer, we're growing, and my big thing for Yammer is to just like I said, like people to be able to achieve their individual goals. Like community is everything. Like that's what we're trying to create. Like I don't want, say you have one person that does really well in a competition, like you can't invest your sort of happiness into them achieving that. Like, of course, I want to do everything I can for someone to achieve that, but it doesn't make them any more important than someone else that literally just wants to like feel more comfortable, or like, maybe their life goal is to get a blue belt, and like, how do we get them to that level, So, building Yammer, growth, definitely just having like regular, consistent members, just having more and more people wanting to come and train. So I think like just a natural growth with Yammer, people that want to do it, and obviously just expanding. Like I do the little kids, the teens, and like I teach all the classes at the moment, which is like definitely really good to know that I've had that like kind of quality control almost of like showing everyone everything. But I think as we expand, definitely like maybe having some younger people come through that could then instruct. Like some of our older kids in the kids class are like so good already. I think they'd be amazing to have help out. So grow that. And then in terms of me, I've got my own like individual competition, like probably like goals and aspirations. I do think in some ways to compete and do well is a nice way to endorse like the really friendly, welcoming gym here, because I think there can be a bit of a misconception where it's like, no, we're savages, and it's like literally swim or drown, and if you can't stand the heat, get out of the kitchen. Whereas I want to be like, like friendly and welcoming, and have a nice role with like whoever, older people, younger people, like regardless of your ability, and like be super welcoming, but then be able to go and compete and do well and win. I feel like endorses or like proves my point that you don't need to always be like, like we're just a competition gym, we're not welcoming. So in terms of like competition, for me I think it's important for myself to go and compete. I do think it improves me as well. Like it just highlights any technical weaknesses. If the same thing's happening in a competition, and you get your guard passed and held in side control, then maybe your guard retention needs to be better, or maybe you need to look at side control escape. So it very quickly highlights holes in your game. So I think it, if anything, does help you improve, and it does make you, as soon as you enter a competition, I think you're like, oh right, well I know that this is happening on this date. So I think even if it's subconscious, you eat a bit better, you hydrate, you sleep a bit better, you have purposeful practice in your training. So I'm definitely not like going to be like competing every weekend. But I've entered the Europeans in Rome, and again that's as much for the experience. Obviously, in my head I would like to do well, but also just think it'd be a really good experience to go and compete. And I think it is like, I don't want to use the word like leadership, but as a gym kind of like the main instructor here, I think you have a responsibility to do more. I can't say to my students like, I think you should go and compete if I'm not competing and doing well, and I want them to realize like it's not super scary. I think the Marines definitely taught me that, where like you find yourself getting nervous like before a competition, you get butterflies in your stomach, you feel a bit sick, and it's like nothing like getting off the train at Lympstone like for training, or it's nothing like doing like your parachuting course and you're like, you just feel horrible. Like, so actually like when you compete, I'm like, get those calming nerves, but I realize I've just through Marines training, you've actually been through a bit more than a lot of people. So in some ways, competing is their opportunity to like get nervous, manage their nerves, and then compete. And regardless of how well they do, I do think competition's important. And I'm quite big on explaining like the points to people here, which seems a bit strange because sometimes I'm like, if someone's quite new, or there's a couple people that at the moment have no idea about or no desire to compete, and I'm like, oh, but you get 3 points for that. Like the kind of example I use is like, if you and your friend were going to go and play tennis in the park, you wouldn't, even if you don't think, right, we're going to go to Wimbledon, you have a better game of tennis being like, well, I now get to serve, and then if I do this, like, I would win. So I think it's just helps everyone have a lot more play. I've noticed it a bit more with the women as well. Like they're not, sometimes I'm like not wanting to generalize, but say like you do a guard pass or a sweep, you get 3 points. And some people times you just like, do a sweep, and they're like, okay, they come up and they want to know why. Whereas if I'm like, oh, do this and you get 2 points, and then do this and you get 3, it helps them process what they're trying to achieve a little bit better. So it gives them a better pathway to like what they're doing. So yeah, that's kind of the community blended with competition. But yeah, I think it would be naive to have like competition goals as like my life goals. I think the life goals are definitely like to build the community through jiu-jitsu and hopefully be a good coach, really.
Where can people find Yama Jiujitsu?
So we've got a good Instagram, thanks to Kathleen. She takes all the photos, and then I generally try and write the copy, but she definitely gives it a good look before anything goes out. So she keeps an eye on that. So Yama Jiujitsu is our Instagram handle. We're active on there. Or same as our website, yamajujitsu.com. Pretty active if anyone ever wants to come and drop in and train. I'll just touch on like you said, where did my training go? Like once I was in the Marines, obviously one thing with the Marines is like traveling around a little bit. You're never in the same place for the same time. So actually sometimes progressing in jiu-jitsu is really hard, like not being under the same coach. So I trained a bit, passed out of training, and then my knees were so screwed from commando training, like crawling through the tunnels and stuff. Like I couldn't put my knees down on the ground without getting like really bad pain. So coming back to jiu-jitsu as soon as I passed out like wasn't an option. It took about a year for me to be able to put my knees down and it not hurt. So then that was like about a year later, I started going, when I was based in Poole, I went to jiu-jitsu there. So trained there, got my blue belt and purple belt there. And then we moved to Exeter and I got drafted to Lympstone. And that was actually quite a cool draft because I was in the like recruitment team. So we went all around the country. And at that stage, as we said with my hearing, so there's always a chance I was going to leave. It allowed me to train at loads of different gyms and just pick little bits from all the other gyms and be like, oh, that's so good, like how they do that, or I really like the layout, or I really like what they do there, or maybe even what I don't necessarily like about that. So you could just pick all these bits up, thinking in the back of your head you're going to own a gym one day. And then that's what led to training. So I was training at Fightworks through my purple belt with Darren Yeoman in Torquay for about 2 years. But that's what led me to train with Bryn Jenkins in CF24. We were literally doing an event that week in Cardiff. And I'd met Ben Robson before, who's one of their black belts. And I think I messaged him and said, I'm in Cardiff for the week, can I come and train? And as I walked in, I was just like, oh, this is so cool. It's just like everyone trains really, really, really hard, but just super welcoming, super friendly, like really high level, like really good, like loads of guys, loads of girls, like just a really good community. And I remember thinking to myself, like, as if I do open a gym and we like affiliate with someone, or who would I want to coach me, or who would I want to be part of it? I was always like, oh, it would be CF24. And after like a little bit of time of going back, so if I got like random days off work, because we worked a lot of weekends, we'd get like Thursdays off or Fridays off, so I'd often drive up and train just like for a day with Bryn. And then as that progressed, I remember saying like, oh, if I ever opened a gym, like would we be able to affiliate with you, because I'd love to like have your kind of like mentorship, I suppose. And then he was like, oh yeah, that'd be cool, but like Bryn's pretty laid back with those things. And then sort of as we did it, I was like, oh no, like, I'm going to do it. Like, can we do it? And he was like, yeah, of course. And then he came down in July, and it's just, I try and get up there at least every 2 weeks, so every other Thursday, and our timetable allows that. I made sure I kept Thursdays 3 so I can go up and get good training in there. And they're going to come down, they come down pretty regularly. At least Bryn comes down at least twice a year. So that's like, I think how I bridge the gap between, like, I don't want to say staying motivated because I always feel motivated, but like I have a few training sessions here, and then I like go up and it's just amazing to just like, not be talking, you're just literally observing, like absorbing everything Bryn's saying. And I've always got loads of questions for him, and then just have some really, really good training sessions, and then like come back kind of energized again back for the Thursday night class here. So it's a bit
it must be good being able to go somewhere like that, because he's competing in Polaris over the weekend. This podcast will be out on Monday, so it'll have been and gone then. But it must be good having somebody that's sort of like that high profile, for you to be able to almost push yourself and almost, I'm going to use it like quite loosely, sort of emulate, the way that you want your training to be as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Like he's, Bryn is so high level and so good at it. It blows my mind, like how good he is. I can't, like, when some people you feel like you might do okay with, and I can't comprehend how good he is. But it's not just that, it's the fact that he's like, he's kind of done what I'm sort of trying to do. He's built a really good community and a really good gym, so I can be like, mate, like, it's been quiet this week, whereas everyone, because there's no rhyme or reason. You would have an October where, like, someone's car's broken and someone else is like, dog's sick, and like someone else is working away, and you just be like, whoa, there's no one at the gym. But it just happens like that, and you've kind of got to keep the faith. But I think having Bryn there, to sort of guide you through it is helpful. And just like he was saying, like he said to me, just keep talking about what you believe in and what you want for Yammer, and people will buy into that. Like, it isn't going to be for everyone, but people that do buy into it will like kind of fiercely protect it. So that's kind of why I keep harping on about like community and everyone looking after each other and training together. And I do believe you can get really, really good just training here. I think being a surfer, you're like, I'm not from Hawaii, I'm not from the Gold Coast, so maybe I can't be like really, really good at surfing. But I think here, like, you've got, especially with the internet, you've got 4 walls, the gym's open, like you've got willing training partners. I think you can get really, really, really good. And I think that's starting to happen more and more with like, like the Norwegians, and like there's a lot of good people coming out from quite like previously unknown places. And I think like if you've got the right attitude and kind of learning environment, I think you can get really, really good without having to be from a certain place, which is like the opposite of kind of how I think surfing is a little bit.
Awesome. So if you want to get involved with Yama Jiujitsu, go to yammer.com on the internet, Yama Jiujitsu on Instagram. Ben, it's been amazing talking to you, mate, and thank you very much for inviting me to your gym and letting me train here with you. And your stories have been awesome, mate, so thank you.
Cheers, mate. Thank you. See you soon.
And that's it. Go and check out Ben's gym at Yama Jiujitsu on Instagram, and also if you go to yamajujitsu.com and have a little look at his website. Thanks for listening.